Hi, I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of the day to attend the Silver Viper Minerals talk. You're going to hear about a very exciting precious metals exploration story focused in Sonora, Mexico. I'd also like to thank Brian Lundeen for inviting us to participate in the New Orleans conference and for his continued support and coverage of the company and the Gold newsletter. I'm sure many of you are subscribers and already know, but Brian just recently moved us up to a buy based on an exciting discovery that we made at the El Rubi area of our project, which we will talk about later in this presentation. I will be making forward-looking statements in today's, so I would draw your attention to this slide. When you're looking to invest in a precious metals exploration company, there are three main things that you should be looking for in a company. One, that it has a high-quality asset. Two, that it still has lots of potential. And three, that it has a strong management and shareholder group behind the company. In our case, we certainly have all three of these things. When we're talking about a high-quality asset, we're talking about the La Virginia project. This project is the flagship project within our company. It was Minefinder's #1 exploration asset when they were bought by Pan American Silver in 2013 for $1.5 billion. They spent over $10 million on the project and completed over 50,000 meters of drilling. We were then approached by a group in 2018 that controlled the internal claims of this project and presented us with their situation. The situation was Pan American controlled all of the surrounding claims. They had given back the internal claims to this group, and they did that for two reasons. One, they thought that ultimately this group would stop paying the taxes and they would be able to go back in and stake the ground and get it back for free, as opposed to paying the back end option of payments that were owed through the agreement with Minefinders. And two, they knew because they had all the data that someone would have to come to them ultimately to do a deal on the project. Fast forward to 2018 when we were approached by that internal group, and that's what happened. We were approached by that group. They said, here's our situation. We were very attracted by the grades that have been made public in the first 50 holes. We then signed a CA with Pan American, got access to the full database, saw that the results were very good right up until the end. But what really intrigued us was all of the work was focused on a very small portion of a project that is 37,000 hectares big. And no modern exploration was done on a lot of it. I mean, there was no sampling, there was no mapping, and that surprised us. And so when we went down and did our site visit, we were looking to see if there was a reason for that, and there wasn't. On surface, we could see the same structures running for tens of kilometers that run right through the area that was being explored historically. And that's what drew us to the project, is we were a group that's very strong in exploration. We have a reputation for making discoveries. And so we said there's going to absolutely an avenue for us to get involved and add a lot of value in this project. And we fast forward to the end of our first phase of drilling, and we put 5 reconnaissance holes into our #1 exploration target and made a brand new discovery at the El Rubi zone of the project. That zone sits 5 kilometers north of where all the historic work was done. And you can see a grade here on this page from our discovery hole, which was 13.3 meters of over 3 grams gold and over 200 silver. But what's happened since then is that main structure, as we've gone north and gone deeper, the grade has increased. We consistently see over kilogram silver numbers associated with high-grade gold. An example of that is hole 218, where we saw over 20 grams gold and over 1,400 silver. And that's the main El Rubi structure, but there's also been secondary structures, high-grade stringer zones, and oftentimes a very broad low-grade halo around those high-grade zones or independent of the high-grade zones. And what we've started to envision at El Rubi is the potential for an open pit, a large open pit component, and then going underground in the high-grade structures afterwards. That was further enhanced by hole 245, which was on our latest press release. That was a discovery of a brand new lode within the El Rubi area. It sits 100 meters to the west of the main discovery and main zone that we've been delineating at El Rubi. And with that zone, you really start to see the potential for an open pit. That was our widest width to date of any intercept of the project, over 110 meters of core length. Grading, not exciting numbers oftentimes to people, but what you have to understand in Sonora is that this is open pit heap leach country. The average mine grade in Sonora for open pit heap leach is about 0.5 gram gold with cutoffs down around 0.2 and 0.3 grams. Our intercept there was 0.75 grams gold and also almost 40 grams silver. So we're well above that average and also have our high grade components to bring up the grade. But we're very excited about that hole. We definitely got some attention in the market, and what really happened is a lot of the majors started to take attention based on results like that. They see holes like that as being large ounce builders. You can get to very large deposits very quickly if you can continue to replicate numbers that we had in that hole. But we also have our high grade component to fall back on as well. So very exciting story, and we'll dive into that a bit further. We're working towards defining a maiden resource on the project. We're still on track to produce that by the end of the year. Our independent will be going down to site in October, and work continues on that. But we're really excited to finally, get some credit and value for all of that historic drilling that never saw a resource. We feel that we're getting, zero credit on our market cap for all of that historic work and the ounces that are contained in that historic area. And then we'll also include El Rubi in that maiden resource. And I think we're very excited about that. To us, the El Rubi zone looks even better than the historic zone. I think it's already, getting to the size that's larger than that zone, with lots of room still to grow open along strike and at depth, and lots of, different new targets with potential for new discovery in the El Rubi area. The third we talked about was strong management shareholder support. We have a very strong technical team, probably the top exploration group in the industry. We have 4 senior geologists with over 150 years experience in the industry. They've worked for producers, they've worked for juniors, they've worked all over the world. This is invaluable for us as a junior explorer in that, most of our peers work within a group that's a single asset group. You can't afford to have, that many geologists on staff. In our case, we were members of the Belcara management group. So each geologist takes the lead on a different public company. We have 3 public companies under our management currently. Each of us take, kind of a focus on one. But in the case of the geologists, every, project that we have within the group, they're constantly bouncing ideas off of each other, going over the maps, coming up with ideas, planning, drill programs. And it's just invaluable for us. And along with that also comes the respect of the majors. Majors oftentimes have gotten involved with our group at much earlier stages than they would with other groups. They respect the level of work that we do. We've had partnerships with Hecla, Pan American, Agnico Eagle, Fresnillo. Our last project was the La Preciosa deposit in Orco Silver. We sold that in a bidding war between Coeur and First Majestic. Companies want to get involved with us. They respect the work that we do. And, for our shareholders, that's great because those are, the large liquidity and exit events where you can get a big premium selling your company in the end. We have very low share count. This company was set up as a true IPO at the end of 2017. We just recently triggered an acceleration clause on warrants that were from a financing a year ago. So we sped that up a year. That was triggered based on the stock trading at 70 cents for 10 straight, or a volume weighted average at 70 cents for 10 straight days. So we still only have 81 million shares outstanding. We're cashed up. We did a financing in June and also brought in the 2.8 million on that acceleration clause. So, we're financed to do exploration. We may decide to do another financing if we decide to, expedite the program and speed it up and add rigs. And there's been a lot of pressure from our large shareholders to do that, but it's very exciting times and a very exciting project. The project is located 220 kilometers east of Hermosillo along a paved highway to the town of Nacori Chico. From there, you take a well-kept gravel and dirt road into camp. Our camp is located on the hill in this picture right in this area. That area is the La Virginia portion in the historic area of the project. The picture is being taken from Las Vatas, and the Com Virginia zone sits in between. Where our discovery at El Rubi is on the other side of that hill to the north. El Rubi sits on a, you can see here it's a bit steep. El Rubi sits on a flat 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer flat plateau, which again would be very favorable for open pit mining. Just quickly here, you can see our, our claims package. We talked about the internal claims that were controlled by the historic group, and the surrounding red claims were the ones that Pan American had. We own all of the claims in red, 100%. We gave Pan American a 2% NSR. On those internal claims in the blue, we have a heavily back-end loaded payment plan there. We've made the payments the first 2 years. You can see, we designed it that way so the bulk of the money would go in the ground where it belongs, so we can get the most information possible before we have to make that final payment. Of note, that final payment can be paid half in shares at our discretion. And we also gave a 2% NSR just on those internal claims, but we can buy that back for $2 million in the first 5 years or $3 million for the life of the project after that. Very exciting project. When we're looking at these, all that historic work was done right in the core of those blue claims. Our drilling at El Rubi now has taken us off of those internal claims and onto the Pan American ground to the north. This image on the left here is just to kind of show the overall potential. The red or the black checkered line going right through the middle of the project, running north-south, is the large regional fault. Our structures that run on surface run parallel to that large regional fault, and again they outcrop as these large silicified dikes over tens of kilometers. This is, if I scale that image on the left, there is about an 80-kilometer long box. Lots of prospective ground. And again, we can see these dikes. It's just focusing on which ones are mineralized and have the best widths and grades. On the image in the middle here, you can see all the black dots. That's all the historic pads where Pan American Mine Finders did their exploration. And then you can see, again, we're zoomed in on those focus on those internal claims, but you can see El Rubi up there to the north and where we made our discovery. There are some old workings in that historic area at Converginia and Las Huatas. This is in the Converginia area, one of the adits. This is just included to show you kind of what it looks like underground there. We're dealing with a low sulfidation epithermal system with stockwork veining. As we move north, it starts to look, even better at El Rubi, and we start to see more and more breccias associated with that stockwork veining. You can see up at El Rubi, this area has been reworked, 2, 3, 4 times, lots of different events. The breccias that we see are coming from down deep. They've got smoky quartz associated with them. When we see that, we know that we're into some pretty high grades. We took ownership of all of the historic core, and that's what that image on the left is showing. It's all stored in a warehouse in Hermosillo. We have all 188 holes as well as the pulps. So for the purposes of a resource, or we can go back and reassay anything that we might need to. We can go and look visually at the physical core and see, what they were seeing in that historic area. And we've also leased the warehouse next to that now to start storing our active core. You can see some of the grades that drew us to the project there, 23.5 meters of almost 900 silver equivalent and 18 meters of 400 silver equivalent. Those are, very good, very nice results in their own right, but they, as we went to El Rubi, things have gotten better. So let's talk about El Rubi. Again, you can see a couple of highlight images here. This core was from our discovery hole. The one thing we should touch on is that image in the top left. And we use a man-portable rigs. We're environmentally permitted to work all over the entire project. We reuse all that lumber that you see that is the pad. We pick that up after we're done drilling from the pad, move that to the next pad. Once we're done, we throw down some grass seed, and really you can't tell that we were ever there other than the drill collar that's left in the ground. Semernat loves us. It's an advantage that we have over the work that Mine Finders and Pan American were doing. They were using very large track-mounted rigs, bulldozing in roads. We don't need to bulldoze in roads. It saves us a lot of money. We use mules to move the core back and forth to our staging ground, and also the diesel to the rigs. What we normally do is helicopter the rig into El Rubi at the start of our campaign, and then from there, the guys are able to use the manpower to move the rig around. It's been, a lot of technology has changed, and the man-portable rigs can go, all the way down to as deep as 1,000 meters now. We're obviously not putting holes in that deep, but we have gone as deep as 500 meters. They're very accurate. Not a lot of deviation. It's, Globe Explorer's done a fantastic job as drillers for our company. And for us, man portables are the way to go anywhere now versus those large track mounted rigs. This image on the right looks like, a moon with gold laced through it. That's as at El Rubi versus the historic area, and in most projects that we've worked in Mexico, we're seeing more and more visible gold, which is always nice to see. It's kind of rare in Mexico. You don't often see a lot of visible gold. You can see, the silver, sulfide mineralization, but visible gold is very nice to see. Our project is split about 55% gold, 45% silver, which is very high silver content compared to most of our peers in the industry. There's not a lot of companies that have that level of exposure to silver. One of the funds that owns us is the Silver Fund at Sprott, and she said at 45% we're one of the highest percentage silver holdings in her portfolio. I won't spend too much time on this. These are certainly the higher grade holes. These are the main El Rubi structure in some of the stringer zones. Our high grade zone runs anywhere from kind of a 0.5 meter up to 8 meters wide. Again, some pretty spectacular results, but what's not included here again is that there's no room, but we've, a lot of these holes go through 6, 7, 8 different zones, some low grade, some high grade. We get, anywhere up to 80 meters wide in the main zone with these low grade halos but still running at economic open pit grades. You combine that with our discovery at hole 245, which sits 100 meters to the west, and you start to really picture here in this image on the right, an open pit forming that, we drilled that hole, scissoring back to the other ones, trying to pick up some of the high grade stringers we had seen down deep in the holes that were going through the main zone. But to encounter this, over 100 meter wide zone close to surface, we still believe it's a vertical structure, so we're going to be putting some holes up in this area coming back through to prove that theory out and start to flesh out this new discovery. We can see the structure on surface. It's not necessarily outcropping as 100 meters wide, but it wouldn't surprise us if this thing runs for hundreds of meters or more along surface, the same way El Rubi has been running. Very exciting. The rig is currently drilling there, and we're waiting assays back on our additional holes in that zone. But this hole was a game changer for our company, and certainly got the attention of the majors. We before this conference did a couple of conferences in September, and we've had a number of new majors there that requested CAs that are interested, and a lot of it was based on this hole and combining with the past exploration work and discoveries and results we've already had at El Rubi. This is some core from that new discovery hole on the western zone. Again, looks very much like El Rubi core. You can see we're in stockwork veining. You can see the breccias. Very nice looking rock and very consistent rock in that hole. Well, this section was done before we had made that discovery, and it isn't on that section, but we could see what we were envisioning here with some of these high grade stringers and what we were targeting. And then you can see that main El Rubi structure that's wider, with some very nice grades associated with it on this section. While we find that mineralization exists in all three of these levels down in the rhyolites and in the andesites here, we do find that this andesite agglomerate is the best horizon for finding the best widths and grades. It's a more brittle rock. It's allowed for the fluids when mineralization was occurring in the different events to kind of bleed out further into the rock, and so that we do find that our best grades are in that, but we also believe that these stringers are going to come down together as we go deeper and become one kind of source of fluids in the area. And we have seen mineralization right into the rhyolites as well. One of the things we did, again, this portion of the project had never been sampled or mapped under Pan American. So after we made that discovery at El Rubi, we, set out to start, trying to see what else was in this area. And so these blue lines represent geochem, soil samples taken all across that El Rubi area and around. And we instantly found 3 drill-ready targets in the northern anomaly, Macho Libre, and the eastern anomaly. We're anxiously awaiting all the assays back from some of those targets. We've now drilled all 3, haven't seen assays for the northern anomaly or the eastern anomaly yet. Macho Libre, we hit mineralization not at the same grade as El Rubi, but that's a 2-kilometer long target in itself. And what we saw was that we were much higher in the system there. So I would expect if we go back to Macho Libre and drill deeper that we will end up encountering that El Rubi horizon and hopefully the same types of grades that we see at El Rubi. But again, that target certainly isn't dead. We saw the structure in every hole. It's just an act, I think, of steepening up and going deeper. The northern anomaly is very interesting. We're encountering a lot more copper in that area. In El Rubi and the historic zone, the copper is barely anomalous if non-existent. Up in that northern anomaly, we're seeing a lot more copper associated with the gold there, and that may be a fact of as we move north, we're moving towards the porphyry target on the project, which is the Glory. And you can see it kind of the start of it marked on the top of the map here. That's a 3K by 3K, large porphyry, zone of alteration that from our sampling and mapping and some shallow holes that we put into that in phase 1 that very much is a porphyry. And so as we move north, you may see more and more of the base metals pick up as you enter that porphyry environment. We've been tightening up the spacing up here on these lines, so I would expect this image to get upgraded soon, but these are 800 meters apart for scale, and each dot is 50 meters apart. So, it's very interesting seeing this kind of anomaly start to develop up here, and we want to tighten up that spacing and make that a drill-ready target as well. If that can hit, or the eastern anomaly hits, and when we start to progress up there, that's showing the potential for another major trend, similar to the trend that runs right through El Rubi, but 2 kilometers away. Again, just adding to the potential size that we could have here just in this El Rubi section of the project. Again, this is where we're focused, and you can see why with all the different targets and the success we're having at El Rubi. Interesting enough, we did our geophysics on the back end of doing that geochem, and this large arrowhead shape kind of sits perfectly, in the middle of all of our anomalies that we identified. We believe that this is a buried intrusion. Again, could be, one of the main feeding systems for this, the mineralization in this area. And so we think all of the periphery of that intrusion is certainly potential for mineralization. You get some different magnetic highs and lows out here. All of this is, again, stuff that could be drilled and potential for new discoveries. It looks like as we move up to the northeast, there's another intrusion that's coming here. So again, all throughout all of that contact is highly prospective for mineralization. And again, we see those silicified dikes outcropping up in this area on surface as well. So very target-rich environment. We've had lots of success at El Rubi, and we're hoping that we can continue to find additional El Rubis in this area. Again, here's some pretty pictures with some visible gold in it. This image on the right, again, is showing as we move north that we're entering a higher heat environment, which our geologists definitely like to see. We're working on getting our LiDAR survey done, which will give us the advanced topographic for that portion of the project, which we need for the resource, and also just another layer of information for targeting, things that are undercover. Again, lots of work ongoing. We have 2 rigs turning right now, and it wouldn't surprise me if we're adding a 3rd rig here in the near future. This work was the wireframes here were done after our phase 1 program. Nothing's going to change on that historic area here with our resource, but Rubi was, only 5 holes at this time. You can see just the start of the plateau forming here. And again, that LiDAR survey will give us this advanced topographic on the further north portion of the project. All of this area in between here is, Macho Libre sits at the start of it, but all of this is highly prospective. We don't think the past work, they were following a road and did kind of holes of opportunity. We think the main zone is running higher up here through the hills. So again, this is another large area that warrants a lot of follow-up work with additional rigs. We've started our preliminary metallurgical work. We just recently got back our initial study on the bottle roll test that we did, but this were samples that were sent off to the lab in Hermosillo. Just shows, in layman's terms here, the silver is hosted in acanthite. It's very common for a low sulfidation epithermal system. We don't see any negative minerals associated with it. Gold and silver alloyed is Electron. On the preliminary results we've seen from our first couple of samples we sent off to the lab for metallurgy and just simple bottle roll tests, we're seeing gold, the rock leaches very well, which again is important if we're talking about open pit mining, but seeing greater than 90% recoveries across all the grade ranges for gold. Seeing silver recovery is fairly high for leaching, but what I would ultimately envision on that high grade silver and gold samples is that there would be some form of an additional circuit in a mine that would be more appropriate for the really high grade material. But we're very excited about checking off that metallurgical box and looking forward to even improving it further before this thing ever becomes a mine. I mentioned the Belcara Group and Orco Silver and our past discovery already. These are some of the names of the guys associated with the company and girls. Very good group, been around in the sector for a very long time and very well respected. Here's our share structure that stands right now. This year we upgraded our US listing to the OTCQB. Lots of feedback. I've seen it in the past. That's a very important step for companies to upgrade from either the pink sheets or the gray sheets. It frees you up to be, US retail, to certainly be able to buy your stock through most of the brokerage houses in the US. If you're on the gray sheet or the pink sheets, they're very limited, if 1 or 2 places that you might be able to buy pink or gray sheet stocks now. So that listing, since we've done that, we've seen our US volume increase dramatically and help with the liquidity on our venture market as well. Current share price is 52 cents. And after the acceleration of all those warrants, we're sitting around 5 million cash right now. You can see here some of our notable shareholders. A number of these have been with us across all of the different companies that we run. They got involved in this one, when the company was still a private company. We've also, that's Ingalls and Schneider and US Global, Sprott Asset Management's the Silver Fund at Sprott, Donald Smith and Companies, again, another traditional powerhouse fund in our space. The Contrarian Group is an investor that we're very proud of. I think we're the only precious metals company that he owns. And that is Peter Uberoth, who, has become a family friend of ours, but was, former commissioner of Major League Baseball, ran the LA Olympics, owns 50% or 45% of all Pebble Beach golf facility, the surrounding courses, and was the one who put that whole deal together. Very interesting gentleman. What's been interesting there is kind of he's associated and friends with a number of the who's of businessmen in the US, and the conversations that we've been having and seeing how the perception of gold and silver has changed in the eyes of a number of his colleagues is, like Warren Buffett and a number of the others, is very interesting. And one of the things that we're hearing is those types of individuals are starting to look at, buying out companies like ours or larger companies and taking, the project production, but privately, and using that as a source of gold and silver for the company. So I think that's something we'll see over the course of this bull run is a number of, people that haven't traditionally been buyers in our space, they've, coming in and just trying to figure out a way that they can get physical metals. And it's very difficult to do. I think a lot of the, you guys have been looking at coins and other ways to, hedge against your stocks, and, kind of as an insurance, you want to have gold and silver. And it's difficult oftentimes to get your bullion bars and your coins, or to get enough. And when you start talking about the level of wealth of those individuals, it's probably virtually impossible to get enough gold and silver to fill up their portfolio the way it needs to be. So they're looking at other avenues in any ways they can. So that's very exciting for our sector, because there's going to be a lot of investment come in from those types of individuals. And you saw Buffett do it with his, preliminary first investment into Barrick in the space. And, he's been one of the most negative people publicly about the metal for decades. So again, we're very excited about, the implications of that. And, we're at the start of a bull market, and these markets typically run for 8 to 10 years. We're all very excited to see where gold and silver will end up at the end of this cycle. But, if it's compared to the last cycle, it's going to be at substantially higher prices than we're trading at now. People are worried about it going up $1, if we're talking about silver, up $1 a day, or gold up $10 a day. And I think we'll laugh at that 8 to 10 years down the road when we see ultimately where the prices settle in at. I'd let again, management owns 23%, and we have a small retail component at 17%. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's conference again, or the talk at the conference. Again, we've got a high quality asset. We've got a new discovery with potential for more, a mining friendly jurisdiction, strong management and technical team, lots of potential, strong shareholder support, and a healthy treasury. I'd invite everyone to come visit us at our booth, where management will be there, open to take any questions, myself and the team. And I look forward to meeting everyone and chatting with everyone at the conference. Please enjoy the rest of the talks and your time. And thank you again for attending today.